A photo shoot, one of many in this area on any given day. The photographers from Runner's World. It's a must-read magazine for those who run. The subject of the shoot will be running in the popular Marine Corps 10K on the same day as the marathon. Kimberly Dozier is used to being in front of the lens. A foreign correspondent for CBS News, she's worked all over the world.
Kosovo, Egypt, Jordan, Israel, Iraq several times, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. It goes on and on and on.
It was nothing for Dozier to be assigned to some of the world's hotspots. And when in those locales, she relied on her legs to get her around.
In Afghanistan, to get to Tora Bora, to get to the place that was closest to where U.S. forces were hammering the mountain, you had to hike about a mile with all your gear. And so I had, 20, 30 pounds of gear to hike up and down with every day. It's a physical job.
In May of 2006, Kim had already been in Iraq for 3 years, covering the war with her soundman James Brolin and photojournalist Paul Douglas, doing what they had always done, telling the stories of the war. And that meant being in all kinds of places. Places like a neighborhood in Baghdad with U.S. and Iraqi forces on Memorial Day.
I remember talking to Captain Alex Funkhauser about the fact that on that street where we were walking down outside of our Humvees, there might be an insurgent cell, and the insurgent cell might be watching us at that moment. He walked 20 feet ahead of me. I saw Paul and James, my camera crew, a bit ahead, and in that instant, the bomb went off. It was a 500-pound car bomb, they think. It killed Captain Funkhauser instantly. I didn't know that. I didn't know it killed James instantly. Paul and I were both left fighting for our lives. Paul eventually bled out at the scene with U.S. troops fighting to keep him alive. They were tying tourniquets on us, pumping IV fluid into us, and desperately trying to get a casualty evacuation team to our location. Unfortunately, there were 5 other car bombs in Baghdad that day. By the time I got to the casualty hospital, the combat support hospital, I'd already lost, they estimate, more than half my blood. And, I coded 5 times on the operating table. So it was that close. It wasn't that you almost died. They said, technically, you did die. You tried to die for 2 hours. And we just kept doing chest compressions and bringing you back.
Kim would be transported from Iraq to Germany for more intensive care. Her parents would join her there, but they needed a place to stay, and that's where the Fisher House came in to help out.
While we were in Landstuhl, Germany, and in Bethesda Naval Hospital, my parents stayed at the Fisher House at each place. Now, Fisher House is provided by private donations to provide families of anyone who is combat injured some place to stay that is on the hospital grounds. My parents are old, frail, and nobody wanted them going through some of the press packs that were there in the beginning. And so Fisher House became their home for, a good month. And other things about Fisher House, my parents weren't just staying there, but there's this support system. The spouses of military commanders would all cook dinner on Monday night, and then somebody else would provide dinner on Tuesday night and leave the refrigerator in Fisher House stocked with food. So my parents would get back from a long day, my dad at my bedside, my mom trying to stay in the waiting room so she didn't hear my screams through physiotherapy, and they'd be exhausted, and there would be a homemade meal just provided by people from the neighborhood. And that gave them the strength to take care of me. And I tell you, that is key to recovery, having the people you love next to you.
These days, Kim is a Pentagon correspondent, the author of Breathing the Fire, Fighting to Report and Survive the War in Iraq, a speaker on the subject of post-traumatic stress disorder, and a runner hoping to raise awareness for Fisher House.
Well, I was actually doing a book event, and I'd invited Fisher House. I was selling my books and giving the proceeds of the sale to Fisher House. And so one of their people had come to the event and said, when I made this speech that I was going to run the Marine Corps Marathon, he said, we have a team running the Marine Corps Marathon. And that's how it all came together. It's like, really? Okay, well, sign me up.
but a runner with a purpose for herself.
I mean, before the bombing, I ran as an escape. Not to compete against anyone, not to prove anything. I actually hated if there was anyone else on the running trail. I didn't want to worry about pace. But now running is to prove a point. It's to prove my legs work, I'm just fine. I've fought so hard to get back to whole. You know, look at me. This is what's possible.